Really quick note, as we're going around the room, you'll have to tap your microphone button once to get it powered on. But I'm Brianna Toole, I'm a planner here with the city.
I'm Erica Kubley. I'm also with the City Neighborhood Services Coordinator.
I'm James Pierce. I'm the new guy. Have served on one city commission before, and then I also served on and lived in a housing co-op, affordable housing situation here in Iowa City. So affordable housing is something that's been interesting me for a while. So yeah, that's a little bit of me.
Recording in progress.
Hi, I'm Carol, and this is my first commission to serve on, but I have a special interest in affordable housing, both personal and professional.
Hi, I'm Becky Reedus. I have been retired a couple years from human service work in most recently in Iowa City, so this is my first commission also.
Welcome, I'm Mary Ann Dennis, and I'm retired. I was worked for affordable housing developer, nonprofit.
Hello, I'm Kyle Vogel. This was also my first commission, but they have willingly allowed me, for somehow I have made it through the funnel to be allowed to serve for a second term. So I just started my second term. I own a property management company in town that, I mean, our base is probably about 30 to 35% affordable housing units. So, and yeah, so that's what got me into being here. So.
Hi, my name is Kieran Patel. I actually work for the county in the real estate department at Dune GIS, this is also my first commission. Fourth month, second term though, because I finished up an unfinished term. Yep.
Welcome. My name is Caleb Binding. I work in landscape construction as well as affordable housing, and this is my first term.
Stan Lopperman, work for the city as the senior housing inspector.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Agenda item number 3. We'll need to elect a chair as well as a vice chair. Are there any recommendations?
I'd like to nominate Caleb for chair.
Second. Hold on. Second.
Do we need a vote?
You can ask if there's any other nominations, but if there's not, then you would vote on it.
Are there any other nominations? May I have a motion to approve myself as chair?
So moved.
Elect by unanimous consent? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we'll need a vice chair. Are there any suggestions or volunteers?
Would Becky like to do that?
No.
Okay.
I just want to say the subcommittee is more than I can handle. I mean, not more than I can handle, enough for me to handle this year. So thank you,
Okay.
but no.
I'd like to nominate Mary Ann Dennis.
You accept the nomination?
I would accept that nomination, as long as Caleb shows up most of the time.
I second that.
The nomination or that Caleb shows up most of the time?
Both.
Yeah.
I try my best.
Yeah, you do.
Are there any other nominations or volunteers? All in favor of, or may I have a motion to vote for Ms. Dennis to?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thanks Caleb, too.
Then on to agenda item number 5. Are there any public comments for items not on the agenda?
You skipped over the minutes.
Apologies. Agenda item number 4, consideration of the meeting minutes from May 18th.
I
May.
move approval of the minutes.
Yes, second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 5, are there any public comments for items not on the agenda? There aren't any public comments. Agenda item number 6, Commissioner Vogel has requested that the City Housing Inspection Services staff present information on what issues staff have been seeing during inspections that are affecting the access to housing. Let's take the opportunity to hear from Stan.
Great. Thanks for having me. I took the opportunity to print out what was in your packet, the Guide to a Successful Rental Inspection. If you would like a copy, feel free to grab one, or I can hand one to you. Otherwise, we'll just use these in the office. So if you'd like a, need the paper?
Well, I'd like a paper one.
Yep. Anyone else?
Well, I was going to have them just pass them down old school style, so. I read through it earlier. It was really good.
Yeah.
Because I figured we go.
So yeah, if you had a chance to read through it, that's great. So a little bit about housing inspection. So housing inspection oversees the systematic inspection of the licensed rental units in Iowa City. Currently, we have roughly 4,500 rental permits and 20,000 units. It takes, those units are inspected on a yearly basis or every other year, depending on the type of structure that it is. Older multifamilies or multifamilies that were constructed without sprinklers are inspected every year. Single families with 4 or more bedrooms are inspected yearly, and then everything else is inspected every 2 years. On top of that, we oversee nuisance complaints. We're seeing about 2,500 to 3,000 nuisance complaints a year, and that can range from tall grass and weeds to snow on the sidewalk to trash cans and trash in yards, vehicles not parked where they're supposed to be. And then our department also does the inspection for HQS, or for housing assistance. We do roughly 2,000 of those inspections a year as well. The Guide to a Successful Rental Inspection kind of gives a broad overview of what we look for. And it's a minimum housing code in that we're looking for some very basic items, but very important items. Walls are there, windows are there, electrical outlets are there, correctly installed smoke alarms, fire extinguishers, and then it kind of gets more nuanced as you go through it. Probably important to note what we don't do, and that is we don't get involved with lease issues between tenants and landlords. Landlords not giving proper notice, that's not a housing code issue. It is a violation of a tenant's rights, but it's not something that we oversee in our office. We're happy to have a conversation with the landlord, but we don't have any authority to police or enforce anything with that. When leases expire are another thing that we don't have any say over, in that that's a lease issue. So some of that, we do get those calls. We try to help people as much as possible, but anything that's not in the housing code realm really isn't things that we can deal with. Typically what we're seeing on our inspections and things that prohibit people from getting into housing is some very basic things like smoke alarms and fire extinguishers not in place or not operational. We see a lot of moisture issues right now. And then as we're dealing with housing assistance, anytime that you have kids under 6, we have to be careful that we're not putting kids under 6 in housing that's older than 1978 because of the lead-based paint hazard probability. Our inspections are a little different. We don't identify lead-based paint. We don't go that in depth. But anything pre-1978, we have to assume is lead-based paint. So anytime those painted structures or surfaces are not intact, we have to assume that's lead-based paint in pre-1978. So that becomes a barrier at times for people housing. One of the last things that we tackled was radon in single family and duplexes. That was in 2018 when we reviewed that. That came about, we were seeing a lot of properties change hands as rentals, and there was never any evidence of a radon inspection or radon mitigation. And we could see in that neighborhood that there was a lot of radon mitigation taking place, except in rental properties that would a lot of times change hands outside of the open market. In Iowa, there's not a requirement that a radon test is done. Most private home sales, though, there was a radon test. So we felt that was an issue that we needed to take up in the rental inspection, and we did. COVID slowed us down a little bit in that. It was supposed to be happening right during that first 2020, the first wave. So we kind of balanced out. We didn't want inspectors or additional inspections going on in the property, so we waived that for another year. By January 2024, we should have all the properties inspected that had current licenses and mitigated.
Has that had any effect on budgeting for you guys? Because I know you also weren't collecting fees for a period of time while you were trying to get caught up.
That was my
that all?
question, is who pays for this?
Who pays for the radon? For the testing?
Yes.
Yeah, the landlord is responsible for the testing. So the radon test itself is $125, $150, depending on who you work with and what sort of deal you make if you're doing multiple units. Mitigation is probably $1,000 to $1,500, depending on the situation.
And that's landlord also?
That is a landlord responsibility.
Is there an interval inspection once it's?
So the intervals are every 8 years if you don't have bedrooms in the basement, every 4 years if you have bedrooms in the basement.
So does your department just sort of monitor the city to see where there might be neighborhoods where there's radon? Or do individuals call and say, hey, I think there's a problem here?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. You could have properties side by side, and there's no correlation between their radon levels. It all deals with construction and cracks in the slab of the foundation or the floor in the basement or all of that. There's multiple factors that don't really help us, pinpoint that, yeah, this area is high in radon. We've had some extremely high ones, but yeah, overall, we've had a good response.
Have you tracked at all what that return has been on far as, once we started requiring inspections, how many of those have resulted in necessary mitigation? Are we at like 10%, 50%?
Yeah,
no
we
idea.
haven't.
Okay.
No. I would say probably, anecdotally, probably 15, 20%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Outside of that, there's nothing really on our agenda that we're looking to change our housing code, kind of maintaining status quo right now. There's multiple other issues that we're running into. There's always issues with mobile home parks and mobile homes. A lot of times our housing code doesn't come into play in that because people own their mobile homes, so we're only doing systematic inspections on rental properties. So the fact that you're renting the lot, that doesn't give us the authority to rent or to do an inspection on the mobile home. And there's a lot of ways that people have found creative ways to make sure that we're not involved in any of those transactions. We see a lot of properties being sold on contract, especially in a mobile home park. So in that case, it doesn't require a rental inspection.
How has the landscape of Airbnbs, I mean, have we seen any major issues in Iowa City yet, post Airbnb? Yes?
Yes.
Past the state? Okay.
Yeah. So if you don't know, the state came in over top of all cities and said anywhere that we allow residential property, we have to allow short-term stay. In turn, we've seen an uptick in Airbnb. The state also said that we cannot charge for their inspection and we can't put any additional restrictions on them.
Can you require them to be rental permitted?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Because it was Airbnb. I remember at first
Yes.
You had to
Yep.
be an Airbnb
Right.
and you had somebody had to
Right.
live there, but that,
Right. So our policy has been that we will inspect, and we insist on doing an inspection that we don't charge for, but we feel it's in the best for the community interest that those properties have had someone look at them to say they're in compliance with the housing code. We're seeing pockets of it where someone comes in and buys up multiple units on a street, and it's created some issues. It's kind of tamed down as they become more proficient in managing them, but yeah, I think they're taking, a few affordable housing units off the market, honestly.
Which is what you see elsewhere in the
Yeah,
United States.
right.
I mean,
Yeah, it's the
that
same.
is,
Yeah.
yeah. Parking with those, I mean, I guess because that's, part of the
So-
rental permit process is requiring enough parking. I mean,
They don't
there's
have
no
a rental
control
permit.
over
They
that.
have to meet
yeah.
the housing code, and the state says we cannot put any additional restrictions on them. So
Okay.
we've had some parking pressure, we've had some parking issues, especially with the short-term occupant. Their consideration for the neighbor might be a little less, especially if they're in for a game weekend or just a good time downtown. They'll park in the yards and, not be as friendly as, say, a longer-term tenant in a neighborhood.
So somebody would have to call the owner?
Yes.
Fine.
Yeah, they could still get issued a disorderly house, but there's no ramification to that because it doesn't require a rental permit.
Yeah, so a permit can't be pulled from them.
There's no revoking a
Right.
rental permit. Yeah,
There's just pay a fine if they get a fine, and that's it.
right, correct. Which will go to the tenants typically, which, yeah.
Right.
So back to lead-based, if you see a house that was built before 78 and there's young children living there and you see that there's some flaking paint and stuff, how long does the owner have to remedy that?
So our issue is, we see that typically on an inspection for housing assistance. So we will not pay for that assistance until that is remediated.
So nobody could move in?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. If someone is present, yeah, we work with them through, different means to make sure that it gets remedied. But the only place where that comes into effect is with housing and assistance.
So then, if there's a condo building that has like 4 or 8 units, and one of those is a rental, do all of the units in that building need to be inspected?
Yeah, so we license the structure. So yes, if there's multiple units, even if some of them are owner-occupied, they need to be inspected. Or we have a provision where you can self-certify as an owner, that you verify that smoke alarms are in place, that you have a fire extinguisher. That's kind of one of the concessions that we make to owners.
And some of the newer townhouses like Peninsula aren't because they have the separation or whatever between.
Right, so what you have is you have the fire separation between the units.
Right.
So what you're doing in your separate unit isn't going to have that great of effect on your neighbor. They're multifamily townhomes, which, yeah.
But probably 90% of the condos in Iowa City, yeah.
Or now have the fire?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, for complaints, do you keep track of if a tenant's complaining or if a neighbor's complaining?
Not on a systematic basis, no. We track our complaints. They go into our software. So we can pick up on patterns sometimes. Sometimes we pick up on neighbors that maybe aren't coming with the best of intentions. Yep, and we pick up on that.
Okay.
I do know years ago, you guys had done a really deep study on complaints and like how many of those were coming from rental properties, how many of those were coming from owners. Are you still keeping track of that at all?
We still have that data. We really haven't went back on that. We also did a deep dive into where complaints were coming from.
Right.
Based on census tract, and what we found out is if there's one thing we do well in Iowa City is we complain.
Yeah.
So it was scattered throughout the city, so that was good to see, I guess.
Right.
That it didn't matter about your economic or where you lived.
So if somebody has a complaint about a homeowner,
Yes.
then what's a person's recourse? Do they call the root?
So we have an app called ICGov Express.
It's the best. I use it. They got a file on me. I'm a complainer.
What's it called?
We track Becky in multiple ways.
Yeah.
What's it called?
ICGov Express is
Yeah.
what it used to be. Is it still the same app?
Yeah. So that's probably the best way to complain, in that there's accountability for you, and there's also accountability for staff. And it also guarantees it gets to the right place quicker than as opposed to calling me, who happens to be going on vacation after tonight. So if you call me, it might sit there for a little while, but if you go through and use the technology, or you can go to the website, there's a report of concern. And as far as owner-occupied, yes, we take complaints on owner-occupied as well. They still have to be in compliance with the housing code. It might be we don't have as much authority to do an inspection of the property, but from the street, if we see something, we can address it. So you have public nuisances and you have private nuisances. So if you're sitting in your back porch and you look over your neighbor's fence and there's something that bothers you, that's kind of a private nuisance. I don't have access to that as the public, so that's there's a line there too.
And you have 5 inspectors?
We have a staff of 10, so we have 5 inspectors that do systematic rental inspection, and then we have 2 inspectors, not full-time, 1.62% that do nuisance complaints. We have a scheduler, and then we have 2 individuals that handle housing rehab.
For rental housing inspections, is that the same in-depth inspection as any other kind of inspection? Does
So-
that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. So we
No, what I was meaning to ask, sorry, excuse me, senior moment. For the housing choice voucher inspections, is that as in-depth as a regular rental inspection?
Yes,
Okay,
it's the same inspection.
okay.
There's some changes that are coming to that, and I get the privilege to learn about that here August 7th and 8th. So,
Okay.
but at the same point, I'm sure it's going to be pretty much the same inspection.
Okay.
I just have a thought about Airbnbs, because you said you can't, I am concerned about them taking affordable marketing. I'm also concerned about them driving up the price of housing, too. And a number of years ago, I know that in Cedar Rapids, for instance, they had an ordinance about the number of complaints or maybe the number of times police were called and they could revoke a rental.
Yes.
So is that no longer, that's what I would look.
Yeah, so we have that
You
for
have
rental
that too?
properties.
Okay.
But you have to realize the state came in over top and really came in over top.
Well, that's
Like,
what I was
yeah.
wondering, is if all of the state
Yeah,
did away
there
with
is.
all of that.
Yeah, there is
That's really
little recourse.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
So what data from like the nuisances or the rentals is publicly available?
All of it is available.
What format is it in?
How would you like it? Since I know you work in GIS, I can, yeah, we've plotted it over time, and we've done reports, and tracked, complaints from rentals versus owner-occupied. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. I can't give you anything of note at this point. I haven't looked at it recently, but
Okay.
yeah, we do look at that.
Oh, sorry. Is it identified by locations or actual homeowners
Locations.
named?
No, location.
Okay.
Yeah. Parcel number.
Parcel, I hate that. How am I
But you can go to
supposed
GIS
know?
and just click on the parcel to give you all the information.
If you would
Well,
like the
No,
parcels.
it shouldn't be so hard.
How many rental permits are pulled a year on average due to, do we have an intrinsic problem in Iowa City with over and over regular behavior problems with certain properties, or?
Yeah, we're probably too lenient on that, honestly. We typically go the citation route and work to get the property back in compliance. Recently, we have placarded houses a little quicker. There's something about what happened in Davenport that makes you reevaluate things that you do. For example, we had a car run into a 12-plex on Finkbine Lane on the west side, and we were probably quicker to placard that than we were in the past, and we've learned a lot from that. The landlord doesn't have a problem with that typically, because if he's insured correctly, that allows him to collect revenue. It puts a lot of strain on the tenants who are required to move out.
That's what I was going to ask. When you placard something,
Yeah.
then it affects everybody.
Yep. So if you don't have renter's insurance or you don't have other things in place, yeah, that's problematic.
Or a lack of affordable housing,
Yep.
then that creates another problem.
Yep, right. So
Okay.
it's something that we have to use, but it's something that we
Yes.
don't want to use just because, a landlord is being, prickly with us.
Yeah.
We had another instance on South Gilbert Street where we had 2 set of stairs going up to 4 units. One set of stairs had fallen completely apart, and we were working with a landlord to get this repaired over a period of 9 months. Well, the second set of stairs started failing, so we had to placard. It was incredible how quickly he was able to get it fixed once those notices went up, and he knew he couldn't. And we also have a placard for rent abatement where we say, after this point, you don't have the legal right to collect rent from your tenants. And that's through state code, and we use that also very judiciously.
Is that until they fix the problem?
Yep. So if you have a situation where it's fairly safe, mainly safe, and it'd be more of a issue to move tenants out, we have the ability to go to rent abatement.
Are tenants advised
They're
to
actively aware of everything that's
keep-
going.
to keep the money in their account and pay the full rent once it's over with?
No, with rent abatement, they do not have to pay. This isn't, we're going to escrow until it's fixed. This is, until this is fixed, you do not pay rent.
Wow.
And we've used that probably,
Iowa code says that, 562A says, for the period of time that you cannot use the property you rent, you don't pay rent. So,
we've used that about 4 or 5 times in the past 6 years, 7 years.
So if a building, a little larger than what you were talking about, has 2 staircases that were in disrepair and needed repaired, but there was an elevator in the building, would you placard that building?
Not knowing all the particulars.
Okay.
An elevator can't be used as the primary means of egress. You still have to have stairs that function, so, yeah.
Oh, okay.
anything new, International Housing Code? I know you guys only look at that every few years to see if there's any,
Yeah, it was just updated. I don't think there was any
okay.
major changes.
And as some of you know, I mean, I put my name up originally for this commission because in the commission description, one of the descriptions of this commission was to work with housing inspection to determine and create policies. And so that, I appreciate you coming. I know you're heading out again for a trip, but I just kind of wanted to be able to have that opportunity because I feel like as a commission, it's supposed to be part of our job is to have that occasional update to see if there's things that you can recommend. Yeah, so I appreciate the time. I know it was
And I
another,
don't know
it's
when that was
another
put
meeting.
into the commission's,
My time here.
well, yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure.
And I think it predates my time here, too. So, yeah. And I think it
It's
predates,
apropos, though.
yeah, and I think it predates the time, our departments merged 15, how long ago? 10 years? I don't know. Seems like yesterday. A period of time ago, our departments merged. So to even have that in there, we weren't, we were housing inspection services,
yeah.
and I don't think we were even aware of that charge that was given to HCDC at the time, so.
Well, I mean, obviously, I would love to have this be not a every month thing, but maybe once a year.
Yeah, happy to do it.
I think you realize how important housing inspection is to affordable housing.
Right.
I mean, in finding that fine line of, what makes people safer, but then also doesn't raise the cost of doing business so much that you no longer have affordable housing. I mean, I've been lucky enough to actually literally work with Stan since we both started at our respective jobs within the same month, 23 years ago. So, yeah, it does make a difference. There are some things that can seem like a big thing, but when you have properties that get placarded, it does affect more than just the landlord. It absolutely affects the people that are involved, and those tools can be useful.
It can be useful,
Yeah.
but I also think you got to be careful not to overuse them or especially in this climate. I think the state will come and remove that, our ability to do that, so.
But I don't think I'm talking out. I have absolutely reached out to Stan and his predecessor even before him when I have had clients that are not being as responsive to requests that we've made, that saying, hey, the city's saying, we get pushed off. I've absolutely reached out and said, what can you do to help me get these things taken care of? So it's nice to have a relationship and a teamwork with the city that does allow us to get things done without being too heavy-handed.
Yeah.
So,
And to Kyle's point, there's a landlord association that they meet 9 times a year, and I make it a point to be there, to be available. They're not always happy to see me, but they're also
But we
happy.
keep inviting you back.
That's right. They're very happy that I come for my meeting. So, yeah, I think that's important. Yeah, and another component I'd kind of like to touch on is the unhoused community that we're seeing. It's kind of starting to play into code enforcement and some of the other stuff that we do. So we work closely with Shelter House and Street Outreach to identify camps and make sure that they've had communication with Shelter House to try and get them into appropriate housing. Just kind of off the cuff, they feel that there's at least 55 community members that are street homeless right now. So as we work with code enforcement and receive calls from property owners about encampments along the river and in different places, that's been an aspect of that I haven't been involved in up until about 2 years ago. So it's incredible. We're trying to approach it from a holistic standpoint as opposed to just chasing people out from bridges, but to work with them to make sure that they're getting the services they need to get them, into supportive housing as opposed to just moving them around. But it's getting to be a bigger issue.
Well, I think we're fortunate in Iowa City that we have your department, because I know there's smaller communities around the state that have no sort of rental housing inspectors at all, and there are people. Yeah, and there are people who are living in substandard and even dangerous rental housing.
Yeah.
That really don't have any recourse.
How many other actual scheduled inspection permit departments are in the state? Because most are complaint only, right?
A lot of them are complaint only, and then you get into their schedule is 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And then they run into the issue of they get this far and they feel they're behind, so they just start over at the beginning of the list again and never get to some properties. It's cumbersome. I'm fortunate that I took over for a very mature program. A lot of the big battles were fought in the 80s and 90s by bigger people than I, and there's been a lot of older property managers that have moved along that were part of those decisions. And fortunately, we've been able to maintain a successful program with, a lot of cooperation. So that's important.
But like Quad Cities, I don't even think Cedar Rapids has a.
Cedar Rapids
they're on
has a
long
systematic,
schedule,
but
though,
it's
or
like
something.
7 or 8 years. Yeah.
So.
Well, I appreciate the kind of department and the services Iowa City provide too, and in cooperation with the nonprofit sector, because
Right.
we're lucky to have, the facilities that house them. But I'm interested in the encampment numbers. So you said there are about 55 homeless in camps, and that's grown.
That
So
would-
do you keep some statistics on how that's growing? Because, and I know Chrissy's sitting here in the audience too. I believe, I'm going back in my memory and it's not very good anymore, but I believe at one point with the 501 project that we were closing that gap. And so I'm a little surprised, and then not surprised at all because of the housing situation that's growing. But I'm wondering, in the past 12 months, in the past 24 months, how have we seen that grown in terms of the number of people that are living off the street? And I do appreciate that we're not moving them around because I think that's inhumane. So.
Yeah, that was a anecdotal number that was thrown out by Street Outreach. I think part of it could be more awareness, honestly, as we're out there more. But as far as the historic
So
numbers,
our awareness of how many
Yeah.
homeless folks or people without homes?
Yes.
Okay. But, yeah, that'd be interesting. That's a number I'd like to monitor periodically.
Right.
Just, get thrown at us in terms of what are the numbers living in
Right.
camps and the numbers that are not being provided services,
Right.
housing services, rapid rehousing, whatever, through Shelter House, DVAPs, through the various programs that we have. That would be interesting to keep a watch on that also.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't there, I think I was reading in part of the packet that we do like place and time
Yeah.
studies.
Yeah.
right, that's
We try-
outside of,
Where we try to get an
Yeah.
assessment of like how many, and I know Cedar Rapids does it as well. They try to get a pretty accurate assessment of
Once a year, I think.
once a year about how many people are like actually,
Yeah,
yeah, that's outside of my domain.
yeah. And again, maybe at some point, I'd like to, maybe it's in the future, have, whether it's Shelter House and Company, other organizations talk about that, how accurate that number is, what that gap is between all the housing services we have and the people who are still without housing. I think that would be an interesting thing to keep track of.
and if we're seeing a big uptick in it or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know I can talk to you all night, so.
Another time.
I appreciate you coming this
Yeah.
evening, so thank you.
I'll send a message through the app, so, no.
Got it.
I have your number.
I'll see you at George's.
So I'm as well very grateful for the plethora of information that we just were able to learn and discuss. Thank you again. Agenda item number 7. The city's unsuccessful and delayed projects policy requires CDBG recipients to expend a minimum of 50% of funds awarded by March 15th. Shelter House will now provide HCDC with a brief update on the project that happened to miss that checkpoint, the Shelter House HVAC improvements.
Yes, you are not Stan.
I am not Stan. I am Chrissy Canganelli with Shelter House and here to provide an update on, I think it's an FY22 project.
Can you speak a little louder?
Is that better?
Is
how-
it red or green?
It's green.
Okay, I'm just having,
the feed. I don't think it's connected to the rooms.
How's this? Oh, boy. Okay. Okay. I just have some notes. So the original budget for this project was proposed at $625,000. That dates back to about December of 2020. The actual project, when it came in with bids and was awarded, was $667,865. We have 3 funding sources for the project. City of Iowa City, which CDBG funds at $225,000. Iowa Finance Authority had COVID response emergency solution grant dollars at $242,865. And the Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County, $200,000. With respect to the CDBG funds, we've expended at this time $185,098, or 82% of the funds, and have remaining $39,902, or 18% of the funds. Renovation began this past spring. The project is 80% complete and is expected to be 100% complete in September. The delay in the final completion is due to a supply chain issue. There are 2 components that I don't know the names of that have to do with the fresh air exchange for the overall system, and those will not be available until mid-August. The good news is that the system is fully operational, even without those components, and Not only have we had consistent hot water because we replaced the hot water pump, or the hot water heater, excuse me. We have hot water that supplies the entire facility. We were not always consistently having hot water, so we have hot water to service the kitchen, the laundry, and the showers. But now we have a fully operational HVAC system online, and this is the first time in 12 years where people have literally complained about being cold in the shelter during the middle of the summer. So that is a great improvement, we believe. Let's see. I think that probably covers everything that I have to report. Brianna's been attending our construction meetings, and if you've got any questions, I'm happy to respond to that. And also the questions that were happening before in the conversation, because it was very hard for me to sit on my hands and not respond.
Are we allowed to ask questions from before, like that?
I think if we want to do, we should probably stick to the agenda, but if that's something you're interested in, we can always add that to a future agenda.
Future one then, yeah, that'll be fine, thanks.
We'd love to come in and talk about, we'd love to come and talk about street outreach. Yeah.
So thanks, Chrissy. Do we need to do anything with this, or just say that, good job,
I don't know.
since they spend 82%?
We missed the mark, though.
Yeah, typically when we're bringing projects like this to you, you would have the option to recapture funds. As staff, we usually make a recommendation whether to recapture or not, and in this situation, we've not recommended recapture, so
Okay.
it's up to
Is there
you.
a motion or anything that needs to happen?
You don't need to make a motion unless you feel strongly that it shouldn't proceed, but
No, it sounds good to me.
I feel like she's proven some very strong progress points that would make a recapture not make sense.
Right, yeah. Thanks, Chrissy.
Yeah,
Thanks, everybody.
See you soon, I hope.
Okay, yep, good night.
Agenda item number 8, the home ARP allocation plan amendment. The current standing home ARP allocation plan has been approved by HUD. However, alterations were suggested to ensure future compliance. Projects and funding allocations have not changed. May staff provide a brief overview?
Yes, so we are amending our home ARP allocation plan, and it's actually an amendment to our FY21 annual action plan. The city received about $1.8 million in home ARP funds through the American Rescue Plan Act, and in order to use those funds, we have to submit this home ARP allocation plan to tell HUD how we're going to spend that money. We completed the plan last fall. You guys, well, some of you that were on the commission then participated in the funding allocation and determined who will get that funding. Our plan was approved by HUD, but then we subsequently got a new HUD rep and a new field office director. And so they took another look at the plan and had some improvements for us to make, I guess, some areas that needed clarification just to be in compliance with the new program. I think the changes are largely administrative. We didn't revise any of the funding to the agencies. That hasn't changed at all. It's just kind of the details in the plan in order for us to be in compliance. So some of the updates that we added, there's narrative about how the projects meet the identified need in the community, so just tying that to the needs assessment that we did a little better. We clarified the preferences served, if there's any limitations to those preferences, and how agencies determine who is up for eligibility through their programs. Home ARP serves different categories of qualifying populations, which would include people who are homeless, people at risk of homelessness, victims of domestic violence, and other groups. So this is a little different from our other programs, so it's a little bit of home and a little bit of more intense details, I guess. And so we're just having to be more specific in our plan about who we're prioritizing for funding, which is just kind of wordsmithing and making sure we're just hitting all the points that HUD wants us to meet. We also had to resolve a fair housing concern regarding a preference for youth experiencing homelessness for the UAY project. It wasn't a concern that we had, but they wanted us to reach out to the Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Division of HUD. And we did do that, and they responded and said it was okay. It just took a very long time to get a response from them. So they just had to confirm that we're not violating fair housing by having that preference for youth. So we've been working through those details with HUD. We got the go-ahead to resubmit for their approval with our new field office reps. We have one more thing we're waiting on guidance, and it's just whether it's what kind of priority it is for the program. We already know who we're serving, we just need to know how to set it up. So we'll probably have that change this week. But again, we're not going to change how we're spending the funds, we're just revising the narrative of the plan. So this is a brand-new program. The rules are very complicated. I would not have set it up that way, but I understand that HUD's trying to meet people who have barriers to housing, very specific categories. So Cassie in our office is our grant specialist, and she's been doing a great job of putting the plan together. We met with our HUD rep and a home ARP expert on Friday. And so they said once we complete this, they think we'll have the best plan in the state, which is good to hear. And they're really excited about our projects, especially the DVIP shelter and how that matches our community needs. So that was great to hear. Next steps, we're in our public comment period that's required for the amendment. And then with your guys' blessing, we'll take this to City Council on August 15th and then resubmit to HUD.
We've seen this before, correct?
Yes, you saw this last fall.
All right, and we approved what's in here.
Yes, and so you guys did the funding round, and you determined who was going to get the funding, and then the plan went along with that.
Okay, so this is basically just wordsmithing.
Yeah, it's just administrative changes to make sure we're in compliance.
So do we need a motion to accept or to recommend the, I don't want to call them wordsmithing, revised
The
plan?
revisions, yeah. Yep.
And this is the revised home ARP allocation plan or
Yes, so
action plan?
The revised home ARP allocation plan, which is part of the FY21 annual action plan.
Okay. So can I just so move? No. I'll just move that we accept the revisions as presented by staff for the city's home ARP allocation plan. Is that good enough?
Yeah, and if you guys are okay, there may be that, I mentioned there's that one thing that we may have to update once we hear from HUD, but it's very administrative. It's not going to change any outcome of the plan, so that's kind of a caveat.
I just have a question.
Sure.
And it's more of a curiosity. For some of these organizations that were consulted for some input, there were quite a few of them that said no specific comments were provided. And I noticed some of those being ones that I would have thought would have. Is there a reason for that?
They may have just been at the meeting that we presented at, and they didn't have any direct comments for staff, so they might have been part of a larger group that we presented to.
Okay.
I think that was like the local homeless coordinating board, we did a presentation, we asked for comments, but not everyone would have had comments at that time. It
Okay.
wasn't just like a blank survey or something, it was
Sometimes it
part of a group.
depends on who agencies send, whether or not they feel, compelled to speak up, or it can also depend on if another agency has indicated one of those comments too. That's why they're not in there, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I second the motion, by the way.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes.
Can I ask just a quick question just on this? What's the $200,000 difference between what we've received and what we're expected to make available?
Is it the admin, for staff admin?
Oh, I don't, maybe. It just said City of Iowa City received a total of $1.789 million in funding and expects to make $1.52 million in ARP funds available.
Yep, we hired a staff member to administer the program, and so we'll pay, it must be 10% of, or however much they allowed, we pulled the admin out. Yep,
That's fine.
that's what that
I was
would be. So admin is like staffing.
For agenda item number 9, are there any staff or commission updates?
I have an update on the subcommittee. So we met 3 times. We continue to work forward. I have met with the county to talk to Lynette Jacoby about, so I'm going to back up a little bit. I'm chairing a subcommittee to review the process for providing funding to legacy and emerging agencies. So we have 3 commissioners on that subcommittee. We have 4 representatives that are with the Agency Impact Coalition, and then staff. And United Way has also joined that, so I've met met, a meeting, when I say I met, it can be a phone meeting or a meeting in person. So I've had a couple meetings with United Way, one with United Way, and United Way attended our last meeting and will probably be involved at this point through the. So it's been a good. I think we have the right people right now. I've been pleased with our progress so far. I would like to be on the agenda for, I guess it would be September, because I want to talk to the commission and get some feedback for one of the goals that we're looking at, and we're trying to determine if the commission reviewing it as a whole is the right process, or if we should create a smaller group of people to review that. And I think that we need to get some commission input on that. So I'd like to have that as an agenda item for September's meeting.
So I have a question. Didn't we talk earlier about getting minutes from that?
No, we never talked about that. And I know because I've asked that question, do we have to take them? And we don't have to take the minutes. If you want some minutes, we can probably get somebody to record. I don't know. But we don't have anybody recording them at this point.
I think Nikki's been taking notes of.
She's been taking notes, but they aren't minutes. So you tell me. But no, nobody's ever requested minutes.
We need to get with you then and find out what happened at the last meeting.
Yeah.
I would be interested in knowing like who's involved,
Who's,
who's coming to the meetings.
okay.
I mean, if
We'll have to figure out how to take minutes, because I can't do it, and I can't run the meeting and do it. And it's tough to get somebody so these meetings, how they're recorded, and one of you two have to transcribe and do the minutes?
No, I think the city, we contract someone or we pay someone to transcribe the minutes. We edit them, but we don't do the transcription.
Is it possible to do that because I don't have any problem with doing minutes. It's just finding somebody to record the meeting is going to be the problem.
Well, and I would never expect the chair to also take minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Yeah.
I just think that.
A record of what happened would be good.
Yeah, and I agree.
Who's involved? I think that would
So,
help.
but yeah, I raised that, Mary Ann, did we need to take minutes, and I was told no, so.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's fine, but like I said, then,
But going forward, I don't have a problem with figuring out how to do it.
and I'm not asking for minutes, Becky. I'm
Yeah.
saying, if you can just tell us who's involved. You know, what I mean, you have different meetings, and, you know,
I'll ask Nikki if she can do some
Okay.
notes of the major highlights of it, the people who attended and the highlights of the meeting. Would that be good enough?
that would be.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Agencies they represent.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Okay. So with that, we are, so I would like an agenda item, as I said. This comes out of, the question is that staff have a difficult time getting all the commissioners to score and to do this timely. And I do think that if we are requiring a deadline of the agencies to apply, that we should be adhering to the same thing. So I think it's worth us discussing what are the roadblocks to getting those scores in on time, and should we, and what are some alternative ways in which we can look at that? So staff have asked that to be one of the points that we look at, and so I would like this commission to talk about that so I could take that back to the group. In August, our next meeting is going to be in September. In August, we are going to meet with the Agency Impact Coalition to get feedback from them. And the questions that we are asking them came from staff, and then one came from the commission, and that's if the agencies prefer the joint funding process, or if they'd like to separate. And honestly, I think we're kind of past that now with United Way willing to make changes and such. I think we're okay moving forward with United Way, but we'll still work on these questions. Second one is, what are some of the ways to make the funding process more manageable for all involved? And this is from the agency's perspective, remember. Next one is thoughts on shifting application review to an internal working group. How would they feel if we had a smaller group, not the entire commission, working on the scoring process? So that wouldn't take the commission out of it. It'd probably take there would be recommendations from a smaller group that would come to the larger commission, and the commission would ultimately make the recommendations. And thoughts on adding and removing legacy agencies. And then final ones would be suggestions that they would have for how we can educate commissioners better on the individual agencies that are receiving funding. So if you have any thoughts and want to send them my way, if you don't have my email, you can get it from Brianna or Erica. And
August, what?
I believe it's August 15th. We haven't sent the notice out yet, so. So that's where we are, and I think I see from the timeline that we will be done. The date I'm working for is our January meeting, is that right? Yep. That's, actually, I think you gave me a little bit longer, because I think I was kind of shooting for November, so I'm kind of thrilled to have a couple more months, so.
Thanks for taking that on.
It's a lot of work. It's a tremendous amount of work, but it's something that and if at any time anybody has any thoughts or you want to share anything with me, I'm more than open to taking calls and listening to what you want to talk to me about. Thank you.
I have some staff updates if nobody else is going to jump in with anything. In your packet, you'll see a letter from HUD about our CAPER from last year. This came much later than normal. We're getting ready to do our CAPER again. So context for new members, every year when we do all of the activities and everything that you've heard about with our federal funds, at the end of the year, we submit kind of a closeout report to HUD called the CAPER, and they review and approve that. So we got our final approval letter from HUD for the CAPER last year. Some highlights from that was that we met our timeliness goal, which was really difficult to do the last couple years, and I know a lot of other cities struggled with that, so we were pretty proud to meet that deadline. And then we also have expended quite a bit of almost all of our CDBG CV funding, so that's winding down too. Yes, yep. Other updates, you saw the calendar in the packet that you mentioned, Becky. All of that's subject to change, but at least there's kind of a framework there for you. From the last meeting, we added in an update from the Iowa City Housing Authority. We're hoping for that in September. And then we plugged in some other learning opportunities too. If there's other things that you're interested in, like tonight with Shelter House, we can certainly try to plug those things in throughout the year. There is a memo from Stephanie Bowers about an intercultural development opportunity. I would encourage you to read that letter, and if you're interested, you will reach out to Stephanie directly. A couple other boards and commissions have done that, and I've heard positive things about it. There's no information that would be shared with me as a staff person. It's all just like an individual development opportunity, so feel free to participate in that if you're interested. She would need to know by July 31st if you're going to participate in that. And then lastly, the last thing I have is there's no meeting planned for August. We had a fall break plugged in, but when we come back in September, we'll be bringing the CAPER. It sounds like Becky has some things she wants to cover, so that will probably be a little bit busier meeting. Anything to add? That's all from us.
Thank you for having the staff presentation coming forward for the Housing Authority. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can we plug in something from, oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Can we plug in something from Shelter House okay. I think that'd be great, thanks.
Awesome. And agenda item number 10, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Adjourn.